All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, and the ayes carries. And let's go to point number 3, approval of the minutes for the May 10th meeting. Did you have the chance to read it through and do you have any questions or changes you want to update to it?
Since I've read it, I'll move that we accept it as presented.
And can you get a second?
Second.
Second.
Acknowledge Gwen second. So since we have that, all in favor say aye.
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 Ayes have it. So we move on to item number 4, public comments. And I think we have Norwood Young America City Manager. Do we have Andrea Alquist on?
Andrea emailed me in the morning, and she is not feeling well. Couldn't come.
Okay, so we'll have to reschedule her then.
Yeah.
Did we get any public comments today?
No, Dot. I just checked.
Okay, thank you. Oh, we're moving right along. Action item number 5, and number 5 is action items. I think, would that be Jody? Do you want to explain to us what are we approving on this one?
Sure, absolutely. So we have 3 different library board policies that are up for review and reapproval this evening. I think I'll take us through them one at a time, if that sounds good, Charles.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so the first one is the data privacy of records policy. And enclosed, each of them is enclosed in your packet. This one, we do not have any recommended edits or changes to. Essentially, it stands as enclosed based on the Minnesota state statutes and making sure that it's the most up-to-date version.
Do we want to approve one at a time, or do we want to approve all 3 together? What do you think? Were you intending to approve one at a time? Jody?
Let's do one at a time.
Okay. I do have a simple point of question, like, you had previous policy data was 3/8/2016, reviewed 6/2022. Is it done every 6 years, or is there what's the cycle to review?
Every 3 years for our policies. So, and we just, because of, there were so many kind of coming up at the same time, we stretched them out a little bit so you didn't have like 12 policies in 1 month.
Thank you for that.
If that's all right.
I was reading through, I was like, okay, what's there to change? But it's just a review, there's no changes, so.
I apologize, I should have noted that, so.
Okay. Grant,
I'll
go ahead.
make a motion to approve this updated policy as of today.
I'll second that.
And all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you. Go ahead, Jody, for the next one.
Okay, sure, thank you. The second policy is our programming policy. And again, I should note that this one was pushed out to the month of June for review date. The changes that we're suggesting can be seen in red. And the notes that you'll see, we discussed as a management team and decided these could better reflect our mission and vision, some of the language that we pulled directly from there, such as lifelong learning. And we also felt it was important to make note of some core services or programming services, such as story time for youth services, and then jobs and small business classes that adult services provides. So those are our changes noted. We certainly always welcome questions if you have any, but that's what we'd like to bring forward to you this evening on this one.
I'm glad to see the public computer classes has been modified, I'll say, to jobs and small business classes. If you remember years ago, there was an area of specialization called word processing. There were whole companies. It was a fad. It lasted very short time. And computer classes have kind of fallen into that. It is so ingrained in our everyday life that a class about computers is really outdated.
And there's so much more all-encompassing under that jobs and small business category
Exactly.
we're able to do. And I think especially now coming out of the virtual classes we've been able to offer throughout the pandemic.
I'm just trying to test the microphone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Jody, can you give us an example of, why would somebody want to why would somebody submit a form to reconsider a program?
I don't know that we've had one recently. And maybe it's content that they felt, wasn't appropriate for a certain age group. They felt strongly about something in that regard.
Okay.
Heidi could speak. I don't think we've had anything coming for a long time.
We
Regard-
have not, but several.
Regarding the final decision on appeals rest with the Carver County Library Board, I'm wondering if we might instead say a final decision. We would make a recommendation advising the governing Board of Commissioners there. Some big issues could come up where a request is made for a program, and it might not be something that our director recommended. So my question is, instead of the board making the final decision, the board would make a recommendation advising the governing County Board of Commissioners.
I think that might. I think that might be depending on. There are many. In fact, I think probably most of the programming issues would be resolved with the library board, as I understand the organization. If it became a personnel or monetary issue, or I imagine there are some county policy issues that would involve the county commissioners, but I think most library issues as such, I don't know.
Heidi, were you
What
going to say
happened?
something?
It
Yes,
depends on the issue.
when the county took over governance and we came under county governance, the county commissioners determined there were certain things that the library board would work upon and actually make decisions, and they had to do more with the operations. Decisions on personnel, major decisions on personnel and budgets would in fact remain with the county commissioners, but they actually have it laid out as to what particular pieces are allocated or given authority to the library advisory board, and reconsideration of materials and reconsideration of programs are specifically spelled out.
So that basically, if I understand it right, there is kind of a separation of who does what, I guess, and
Right.
that comes down to the
And
county
and
library
that
board.
and that was decided when there was this change in governance. So the library was no longer on its own. It became a part of the county. And that was in 2008, I believe.
And this is just about programming.
Right.
Well, there is one for materials too, reconsideration forms for materials as well.
Mm-hmm.
But in this particular policy, it's regarding programming, I guess. That's what I'm going to say.
Right, right.
only comment, I do like the fact that I like the lifelong learning part of it. You know, it's not just books for people to read, but it's a lifelong learning. I'm getting very warmed up to that concept a lot lately in the last year. So, can we have a motion to accept this revision or amendments?
So moved.
No, I need a motion and I need a second, then we can vote on.
Second,
I think I need a motion first.
I'll make a motion to accept this policy with the additions in red.
Okay. Jen, did you
second.
second it? Okay. So everyone, threw me off now. Everyone what is that word? All in favor say aye.
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 Motion carried. And the last
May I
item,
ask for clarification who it seconded?
Jen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Jody, go ahead for your third item.
The third policy that's up for review is our unattended children and vulnerable adult policies. Again, you'll note our suggested edits that have either been, we have some strike through in the text and some edited suggestions in red. And when we were looking at this, we wanted to reflect a couple of things that, you know, we heavily suggest that children be in the library with a parent or guardian or designated caregiver. And then reflecting that the ultimate responsibility for the behavior of the children would rest within that parent or caregiver and not with the library's personnel. So we're trying to find a way to phrase that and convey that as best we could in a positive way. So that's the first major edit in that second paragraph. And then further down the page, the other edit suggestion really looks at giving a little bit more defined guidance to when a parent or caregiver cannot be reached and we need to wait for local law enforcement to arrive. Then we wanted to ensure that two staff members should always stay together in that instance. And then as you'll read that under no circumstances will staff members take the child out of the building or transport the child. So again, we're always looking at, we want to keep this at a policy level, but it needed a little bit more definition. We did gather some feedback from our teams as well. Paul, did you want to add anything from, and I know Paul Erickson and I worked a lot on this together with some of the teams that we work with. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that as well.
Thank you, Jody. No, I really think you covered the bases. We explored a lot of additional detail, but a lot of it really would raise as many questions as it would answer. And so we felt that ultimately that this policy, as it pretty much was stated before, did a very good job of at a policy level defining what we should do. We do have on our to-do list as a follow-up to this is to create for staff some more procedural level guidance on what to do in different scenarios that would then be supported by the policy.
Thanks, Paul, for mentioning that.
I have a couple of questions, surprisingly. But we talk about a child, but we don't define what a child is. So is a 16-year-old a child, 12-year-old, or are we talking about 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds? So that is kind of a gray area. The other thing that I wonder about, we're using words now, procedures based on the policy, or, to implement the policy might solve some of the problems. For instance, 2 staff members should stay until law enforcement arrives. What do we mean by stay? For very often this is a question of continuity. Essentially, we don't want any single adult with a child unobserved or puts them at too much of a risk, both child and adult. So when we say to stay, do we mean within the vicinity, stay together? So I'm a little concerned about that. But now those issues could be taken care of in the procedures that are written, which of course have much more detail than a policy would.
And I think to answer or to try to answer your questions, the first one about the age, that was a question we really wrestled with as to whether to define the age within the policy. And that's kind of what Paul was alluding to as well, because then we kept coming up against tougher questions that, then how do you really walk up and ask a child, how old are you? Are they, all of those sorts of things. It just starts to go, so we did have a lot of discussion about that actually. And then also, reached out about Minnesota statute guidance from kind of our local law enforcement and where that all lands. So it's tricky. And in terms of the 2 staff members staying, I think that's really referencing if we're at closing at 8 o'clock and we've got measures of trying to reach out to that parent or caregiver. And at that point, then we would, likely have to call law enforcement and wait until law enforcement arrives and know that the child then is, goes safely with them and they'll take it from there. Does that help answer a bit?
Yeah, it does. Okay. Essentially, it'd be nice to have something that indicates that our objective is to keep the child safe until they can be handed off or are within the care of other responsible adults. And at the same time, protecting our staff from accusations, which can, talk to any school teacher and find out all the measures that they have to follow to protect themselves. Mm-hmm. But that was my only concern. Otherwise, fine. And I'd be perfectly happy to go with it the way it is.
I have a couple of simple questions. Like what are the just from an example standpoint, like what do other libraries within the city, greater part of Minneapolis, do they provide any guidance in how they define the definition of that, like a child or children? Or do they just say anybody under 18 years old is considered? Because I'm assuming under 18 because you have the 18-year-old comment at the bottom there.
I would say when we did some fairly extensive research, on systems like local metro systems and even beyond in outstate. And if and when they did define an age, it was typically, I would say a magic number seemed to be 8. And I think, if I'm remembering that correctly, and Paul might be able to chime in on that too, but that's kind of the number that I recall seeing at the time that we did our research.
Okay. And my other question, go ahead, Paul.
Well, I was going to say there were a couple, but it wasn't universal.
Right.
And again, this was another of those areas that, as we talked about enforceability and the practical way that would play out on the floor of the library, it really just raises a ton of questions which are difficult or we found to be impossible to answer about, are we asking then children to have identification of their age and all those kinds of things. So that was why we felt that it's a well-intended question. There's no doubt about that, of wanting to provide the guidance on that, but how that would roll out in the front line really left a lot of difficulties.
And my other question is, have we had any incidents that kind of maybe precipitated some of the updates to this policy? Open question.
I had difficulty with the audio on that. Could I ask you to repeat the question?
I was curious, has there been any recent or in the last year or so incident that could have precipitated some of the changes, or any incident related to this policy in our libraries? Maybe a kid stayed up and then the parent was not there at closing time, or someone being really roughhousing or rowdy in the middle of the library hours.
I mean, we've had that. That dates back pre-pandemic now, where, you know, we did call for City of Chaska Police to come and check on some younger patrons that were becoming a little challenging. So I think it's coming from a place where staff want to feel supported by a policy that, you know, that they can point to, that, and again, when we look at, you know, delving into procedures about it, then that it helps support that, and staff know that, you know, this is the direction we need to go when and if this happens, if that makes sense, Charles.
It does. I think it's very important that we have policies like this, especially the two staff member one should. It's really an important role to have.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm. Any other questions, Alan? You've been quiet. Any questions from you, Alan?
Yeah, I'm fine. I think we should call for a vote here.
Yeah, let's. I'm going to go ahead and call for a vote. Can we get a first motion to approve this?
I make a motion that we approve the policy unattended children and vulnerable children and adults policy as has been modified.
And can we
I'll
get a
second that.
Thanks, Frank. All in favor, say aye.
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 And we have that carried. And my drinks are taking the minutes wet. Okay, item number 6, unfinished and new business. Discussion topic, learn lesson from pandemic. I think, Jody, you provided that.
The lessons have been provided at the back of your packet, and each of us is going to take a couple of them that were particularly provided by our staff. I'll start out with, and then you can discuss them as much as you wish. I'll start out with the first two. The first lesson we learned was that a single communication venue needs to be established to push out emergency messaging, such as building closures during the pandemic. There were some people, and to be very truthful, we have a number of our staff that work part-time, and so when some people did not hear that we were closed, they still came to the library that next day. We needed some kind of mechanism to actually push out, as in a text message, to everyone on, like the Everbridge system does on emergencies. And I've been in contact with our county's chief information officer, and we've discussed this, and he's on board with actually developing in the county something separate from the Everbridge product that we could use for library closures, whether it would be a pandemic or a blizzard or even a shooter that comes into the library. So we'll be working on that. Bob put a help desk to get out to them, and Pete Henschel has made that one of his priorities. And the second thing that I have was remote work when possible is a productive alternative to in-office work. And I stress when possible because we have a very tight staff, um, very lean staff, and it's sometimes not possible to allow them time off to work from home. And there are some staff members who whose work definitely can benefit by having quiet all around them because we have very few people who have offices. Um, but there are also some people who do not have the offices or their work does not uh, need that quiet or their public facing workers or library assistants for the most part um, have jobs where they're working with the public all the time. If someone gets sick, however, even if they are working remotely, they can be called in because our customers are the most important to us and their needs, that face-to-face need. Did anybody have any discussion they'd like to do on that, or we'll go to the next two? Okay,
I
Bob?
guess remote work where possible. I mean, for some way to keep the library open, some may not have an option but to come in, right? I mean, if they have to keep
Right.
the library. Right.
Right. Bob, do you want to take the next two?
That sounds great. Thank you, Heidi. So the next one was the pandemic forced us to do a number of things we've never done before with our computer, hardware, and software. And we learned about the capabilities and limitations of both the hardware and the software. I would say this was an eye-opening year for all of us. During the pandemic, we migrated to a new software, as you well know. We went to Symphony, Cersei Dynamics Symphony, and Enterprise. Along with that, we instituted a new telephone renewal with ITIVA. And with all of those, it was a pretty steep learning curve. And we've learned and adapted and expanded the use of the technology, which I think is great. Some other things that really became obvious were the kind of the transition software pieces. Like we used Conference Now right when the pandemic hit, and we moved to Zoom for a short period of time, and then we moved to WebEx for about a year. And in the last year, we've been working with Teams, and Teams is going to prove to be just a fabulous tool for us. But these are technologies that we've learned and grown into and expanded with. So there are many more I could mention, but I would just say that the biggest thing that we learned was to overcome some obstacles and to be pretty tenacious about it. In that the learning with the technology and the hardware was changing. We were learning more and growing and implementing new things. I'd say the last couple of things that we've implemented are the Blue Cloud Analytics reports that we're working hard on right now, and also the bookings module that I believe Paul will be talking a little bit more about, and I will be talking about in the future in the August library meeting. So that was just, we've kind of morphed from one technology into many. And then the second point I'd like to make is that this managing technology as we move to remote worker proved challenging because we didn't know how big it was going to be. And looking back, I can say that I had no idea we'd be setting this much equipment home with staff. And I wasn't prepared as well as I could have been for managing that as we moved further and further into the pandemic. So those were the 2 points I was going to make. Does anybody have any questions or discussions about that? for those topics.
Great. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Patrick.
I just want to talk about staff briefly, how we did things as a team. I know in Chanhassen, I know Jody and Paul did similar kinds of things as when it was time to go to a new phase where we were going to just have people come and use the computers. We, as a team, using technology, because we weren't in the building together, sat down at a certain time and had long discussions and created documents that I then sent out and other people commented on. So it was really, I think of the time I've worked at Carver, it was the time I felt the team was the strongest working together. The other thing, and the example I used here was book buddies, is whenever we would do programs, people from Chanhassen would go to programs with people in Chanhassens. But with the Book Buddies program in particular, a kid in Nord Young America could be in the same book group as a child from Victoria. And so I just thought that was very powerful, that technology, COVID forced us to do that, and that we've kept doing it, because that's one of the advantages. Not only can people come, don't have to physically travel to even a close library, is they can meet people from across the system. So those were the main two things that I had, that we learned. Any questions, comments, or smart remarks?
My smart remark is that it almost is like back in the day when we had pen pals.
Yeah. Jody?
Thanks, Patrick. So I'll touch on mine as well. The pivot that our programming staff, our programming teams made from in-person to virtual was incredible. Certainly lots of lessons learned within that. But I think what Patrick alluded to as well, for our teams that are planning programming, we had to really pivot and think system wide. So I think it really helps strengthen our teamwork in that regard, and think about what types of programs to prioritize. That how can we really, how are we going to do this? How are we going to reach our audiences, our communities, our patrons with what that limited virtual environment looked like? Although I wouldn't say limited, because I think we did so much across the board, and we had a pretty quick turnaround, really, when you look back from when the shutdown was and when we started to introduce virtual story times, and it grew from there. So, and a couple of examples where we're at now with what we've carried forward with us. Certainly, we're still, youth services are still offering that Monday Fun Day program, which, we hear great comments that it's nice for families to have that virtual option continue for that early literacy programming. And then a great recent example, we had an author a couple of weeks ago that the adult services team featured, and it was in person, and we had a pretty small turnout in person, but we've had over 300 views virtually because we live streamed it. So, I mean, that to me is really incredible. So great lessons learned there for certain. And then my second piece was really about that communication again with staff, and learning how important that is, and not just having that one-way communication, but asking for their input and feedback, because, and having that buy-in from them and vice versa, and really working together across all staff levels, because what an unprecedented time we all, we're going through. And so that just felt like, again, it goes back to that teamwork piece too, that we were all working truly together on it. Any questions or comments? Then I'll hand it over to Paul.
We had really reflected on how rapidly technology was changing before our eyes. I think as library staff, we've always tried to, we're not on the bleeding edge of technology in our public libraries, but we do try and stay up with the curves that are happening and changes. And one of the things really was going on was as families, as so much was being shifted into the homes for distance learning classes with children and families and everything like that was trying to assist people with network access from their homes, which by definition is going to be a challenge for us right off the bat because we're not there with them. And so the increasing the number of hotspots that we were offered and trying to provide that as a service and look ahead and see how much we could afford and all those kinds of things was definitely a challenge, and we, I think, worked up to it very well. The other that continues to be a challenge for us, and we've had a lot of great lessons learned, and this is really echoing what Jody had talked about, and that was the introducing and bringing into our regular operations virtual programming. And we continue to be challenged by some of the technology that's involved in doing that successfully and doing it well and making it look polished. In some instances, we're able to schedule a second staff person to be there with the presenter and behind the camera, if you will. And then we have another person who's online, and that can be from a distance location, engaging the people who are attending virtually, answering questions, providing them links through the online software and that kind of thing. So we've done well with that, but in not all instances are we able to, for example, have a second person behind the camera. And so the person in front of the camera is doing the live presentation, trying to assess, is this technology working, or what happened if my screen goes upside down on me, and that kind of thing. And there's really been some oddball things that have been hard to figure out as to, for example, is when screens go upside down, is why did the camera do that? So, and then just a different kind of presentation skill. It's one thing when, for example, any of us that do programs or story times, to have that feedback immediately from the audience, seeing what's going well, adapting on the fly, picking up on the cues of your audience and everything. But to do that from looking into a camera without having that feedback is a whole different kind of presentation. So I think staff have done a very good job of learning and how to do all that. And we continue to grow in that area. And like Jody said, it appears as though at least one program series for youth services, as a for instance, the Monday Fun Day, will likely carry on for a while longer. It's certainly right now part of our fall program planning that season. And I've not really been involved in any conversation that would have us thinking that we're going to pull that back. I mean, we've definitely trimmed down the amount of virtual programming we're offering, but I think we still see that there's a role for it.
Thank you for the update. Any comments?
What I find striking,
It's an echo.
Are you getting echo? Well, I could turn off my mic.
Yeah, I think more people need to mute, maybe.
Well, what I find striking is that so many of your comments about what you've learned parallels what I've been hearing from my daughter, who works in a large international financial firm, and other people in industry. Many of these things are very similar, but I think the breadth of things that this list provides goes much beyond, especially in the interpersonal area. You know, corporations have been working with teams for years, but the library, you know, your use of your performance as a staff has been outstanding during this period. And I have bragged about it numerous times, and a lot of people are making very positive comments about how surprised they were at how well that library was during doing during the pandemic. So I think your staff has something to be very proud of.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the biggest compliment you can get is when no one says there's a problem, because they don't realize it's still working well, and because there's so many people behind the scene making sure it works. Then they don't
Well,
realize that it's a big compliment to that.
we always knew you were very special people, and this is a very special document that you put together for us.
So thank you guys. I don't think there's a, so can we go to the next item? I'm not sure. Do we need to approve this or anything like that? It's just an update, right? So next item on the agenda is innovation in small steps on a shoestring budget, and that's Paul.
And I'll wait, and we're going to hope that we're able to share screen. There we go. Wonderful,
Yeah.
Jody. Thank you so much. So next slide, please. So I wanted to, tonight we were originally scheduled to be in the Norwood Young America Library, and as I was thinking about hosting you and what an opportunity that would be, besides providing my usual cookies and iced tea kind of thing, is I was hoping that we'd be able to walk around the library and view some of the changes and things that we have done over the past half a dozen or so years. And a lot of it, almost all of it really, has been on a very small or low or no cost budget. So back in around 2016 or so, as library staff at our branch, as well as myself and analysis that I was bringing to it, identified some pressure points, I would call them, where we needed a larger space and more flexible space for children's story times, space for adult programming and children's programs with a large attendance. And on that point, I would note that when we did need larger space, we would do the programs down at the other end of the building complex in the City Hall chambers, and there was no connection at that point in people's minds between what they had just experienced and the fact that it was a library program, and it would be relatively infrequent that that people would then afterwards come back into the library to check out books on the topic that they'd heard about or whatever. So we had an ongoing need for space for the Friends book sale, for them to do sorting and storage. For years they had actually used the staff break room as the sorting and storage area for the book sale effort, and there was a little room actually in the staff break room for staff to take their breaks, and I viewed that definitely as a problem. System-wide, what we're as we grow, and of course one of our program planning themes is create once and present everywhere. And so we don't replicate the materials we use for programs that are done intermittently. We don't replicate it at all 6 branches, as we'll buy something once and share it around. And as we've done more and more of that, of sharing program kits and program materials, the movement of all that and tracking where anything is and where it needs to go to became more and more complex. And then and just the need for additional storage for that. And then another pressure point and need we had at the Western branches, both at Norwood Young America and the Watertown branch, where we had 2 part-time positions for youth services. There was frequent turnover in both of those locations. Next screen, please. And so we took a look at what resources do we have in front of us. And one of the lighthearted comments that I would make with staff, in essence, was saying to them, you know, it's all going to be about the trade-offs here. We can't expect that we're going to have any significant or any funding through our regular county budget. Certainly we can tap the Friends of the Library and grants and things like that. But more often than not is we're going to be looking at making trade-offs, and particularly with some of the space things. One of the things, when you take a look on the next screen, when we get to it, we're not there yet, but the children's area, in the Norwood Young America branch is about 1/5, maybe 1/4 would be a generous estimate of the space in the total building. And that our circulation and program attendance is much, much higher than that. And there are fixed partitions for which expanding that area don't come naturally. But then we walk through the adult area of the building, and the number of book stacks we had were generous in number, and a large number of the, not a huge number, but a portion of the shelves were empty, and I felt there was a way that we could capitalize on that. And then our periodical area was also seldom used. So we'll see on the next slide, I think, what those things look like. Yep. So looking, and this is actually north facing. So the top of the screen is north facing. This is not quite, this was an older architectural drawing, but it was a pretty good representation of what we had. The periodical area in the northwest corner of the building there was nice seating in there, and we would use it for staff huddles and things like that, but it actually hadn't been used very much by patrons. Along the west wall, you'll see some bookshelves that I've highlighted in yellow. Those were empty. The ones in the middle, sort of right across from the teen area, those were a couple bookshelves that, as we consolidated that whole adult collection, we were able to remove and create programming space. Same with one of the book ranges out closer to the copy print and staff desk area. And then that yellow desk, that was an earlier architectural rendering of what could have been a service desk, but we actually had seating out there, and we still do. And then over in the children's area, in that alcove over on the east end of the building, there were book stacks that came out perpendicular from the wall, and whereas they were filled with books, there was absolutely no doubt about that. It left no real space in the main area there, the children's room, for us to do story times or any other programs. So Jody, if we could hit the next screen and take a look at some sketches, and boy, you really have to excuse my scribble and my shaky handwriting. But what we've done is in the northwest corner, where there had been some seating, is we moved that out into the main area, and I'll get to that in a minute. And that has now become a storage area for Friends of the Library to store upcoming book sale materials and for them to do their sorting. And we also are using that area for staging and preparing program kits that go out to the various branches for programming. And then along that west wall that I had highlighted in yellow on the earlier screen is along the shelves that face out to the wall. We're now using that for storing the program kits that are going in and out between the branches to support our public programming. Out in the main center area there, across from the teen area and the group study room, our conference room, is we've created a lot of flexible seating out there. The tables and chairs that are shown in this drawing are movable, and we do indeed move them around. So when we are anticipating a very large attendance program, is we actually clear out that whole area and are able to seat about, when we have kids sitting on the floor, we can have upwards of 100 kids sitting on the floor with adults and chairs around the perimeter. More comfortable seating out across from the main desk. And then in the children's area, we've created an open space in the middle of the floor for programming, and especially for the twice a week story times for kids to be able to sit on the floor and everything. And the trade-off here, one of the examples for with the trade-offs is the children's nonfiction collection. We needed to find a space for that. And so that is actually out in the center part of the building, near where the program seating and multipurpose area is. Now, it's not the most natural relationship, It does separate it from the other children's materials. However, it does have a relationship to the other adult nonfiction. So that was an example where it was not a perfect trade-off, but it was one that we felt gained us enough real usable space in the children's area to be able to do programs. So Jody, the next couple of screens. And this is just outlining the years over which we did that work. It started in 2016 with a lot of shifting and consolidating and rearranging. In 2019, we had a rare occasion, this doesn't happen often, where we had 2 vacant part-time positions at the same time, and it was coincidence that that happened. We did make a decision, and this was with a lot of angst, weighing the pros and cons, because out of the 2 26-hour-a-week positions, total 52 hours a week, to bring that down to 40 hours a week in order to afford the benefits, we lost 12 hours of staff time each week that typically would have gone towards desk coverage. And that's a real cost. But we've done a lot of shifting. We've created a friend's bookstore out of this effort as well. Next screen, Jody. Outlining the things we're doing right now is we're working on this storage for juvenile kits. And as we grow more and more kits that are STEM kits through grants that we've gotten and things like that, is we're creating a real well-organized area that is ergonomic for staff for moving around these somewhat heavy tubs of kit materials, and to do that ergonomically well, and then also just to be able to have it well organized and efficient to work with. And part and parcel of this, and Bob will be talking about this in an upcoming meeting, is the use of the materials booking module on the Cersei Dynex system. And you all are familiar, everybody here, that we use the library. We request books, and we move, our requests move through a queue, and we get the book when it's our turn. The difference between that and a bookings module is the bookings module allows, in this instance, our staff to reserve, to book a particular program tub for the time period, exact time period for which they plan to use it. So it's much different than the first come, first served holds or requests that we do with our regular library materials. And it raises just a ton of workflow and process questions that we are working through. So the good news is we're very happy that our new Cersei Dynex system has this software built into it, and our staff are really rising to the occasion to configure it and get it working for us. And then I'm committed as the branch manager, as we will continue to find space at the Norwood Young America branch to be not the only storage area for program kits, but to be one of the primary storage locations. And that's a commitment that we're making as a branch. And then we'll quickly go through some pictures here. So, and then next phases is we're just continuing to grow through these steps. Next screen. And so there's the center area with the some of the book stacks that have been removed. All that hardware we have stored safely down in a storage area in the lower level of that complex. And this is an example of where we've got some tables out, but not all of them. But all that furniture can be moved around, and we do move it. The picture to the left are some youth. That was actually the first day we opened after the pandemic, and that's some of the comfortable seating right out across the desk. So we are not at a loss for seating. We've just repositioned it. Next screen. This is the new Friends bookstore, if you will. Those shelves on the left picture, those shelves used to be magazines. Those have all been relocated to an area closer to the front of the building, more visible for patrons to see. And then the picture on the right, which is the back side of that range, you can see more book sale materials being staged, and the Friends of the Library have a work table there. And in the work table that's closest to the front of us, you can see that staff have several different story walks that are out and being cleaned and getting prepared for the next story walk that's going to be out at one of the other branches. Next screen. Children's area. There you can see the perpendicular ranges. We left one. There had been a second one that would come out from the wall, or actually even I think two more. And that was where we relocated the children's juvenile nonfiction. Again, that was a trade-off, but it created a lot of open space on the floor. And you can see that is well used, and it's well used several times a week with great attendance that we're getting now at our story times, which had always had some big ebbs and flows to it. But with having steady staff who have now been there for several years, creating relationships with schools and teachers and pre-K places, we've grown from 1 to 2 story times a week, and we're getting great attendance. And I think that maybe, is there one more slide? That's it. So thank you for your time today, for allowing me to give that presentation. Wish we had been on site. It would have gone quicker if we could have walked around. But thank you for your time today, and I absolutely will love to hear any questions or comments.
Well, I'll just say thank you for thinking of your friends of the library.
And they are a wonderful group, you know, and at the Norwood branch, it's obviously, it's one of our smaller branches in terms of activity level. It really is a very dedicated, very strong friends group.
Well, we're all coming out to see it, unscheduled.
That would be great.
That was a wonderful presentation.
I guess my question is, you know, given that the pandemic was opening up where people was coming back, were you looking at a bit of the organization in anticipation of more people coming in, or how did y'all make that leap to start taking up more space?
Oh, those changes, many of them we had made before the pandemic, and
Okay.
I think it really was analyzing. Those were all trends that we analyzed. That none of that was done with either quick decision or done lightly, but just watching patterns of usage and how the building had been responding to that. What we knew was that the collection there was adequate space for the collection. There was not adequate space for the kind of programming that we were growing into, and
Right.
And so those were really watching those trends.
Thank you. Yeah, that's takes a lot of planning to make all those changes.
Yeah, and again, I would just highlight that one of the key growth areas now for us is implementation of the materials booking module, and Bob will talk about that. It's a great team effort. There are quite a few people who have really rolled up their sleeves and doing a lot of work on it. But Bob is the point person on that one, and we'll talk about that one another day.
Okay. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much.
There are 3 other items on the future potential discussion topics. I'm assuming that's going to be coming up later. It's not for today. It's just for us to know. Is that right, Heidi?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So then we're going to go to the administrative report, and there's no team updates. So we're going to go straight to budget updates and library director updates from Heidi.
And right now, you'll notice it in at least partially in the IFS report that you have before you. We are working on purchasing some replacement furniture in the Western libraries and also in Chaska. What we've done is tried to keep our furniture and equipment looking as new as possible, because then our libraries look as if they are they are newer. And the same goes for our materials budget. It's one of the reasons that we weed, and we have our library staff, particularly our librarians, uh, weed very selectively and to keep our materials looking fresh and wonderful for the public. And I will just go on saying, I only put comments from our lobbyist down at MLA in the packet rather than my regular board report. A little disappointing, a lot disappointing this year that we were not able to increase our regional library basic system support, RLBSS. It Without that increase, it keeps the pressure on our county commissioners and our county, which is frustrating. But I wanted you to see how many people at the state level actually rallied for that cause.
Thanks, Heidi. Is we have the divisional director, is Nick on?
No, it doesn't look like he's here. Nick?
I don't think so. I looked up. And I think I just realized that Matt Uderman also dropped off on that when you get down to commissioner side. We'll just keep going. We'll do the commissioner and trustee reports at Chanhassen and Victoria Libraries.
Okay, I always get to go first. We got to switch this order around next time. I actually want to point out 5 things rather than 3. On May 21st, we had 2 events at the Victoria Library, which you have pictures of. One was the Rowe Family Singers, which was paid for by the Legacy Foundation, which we had a nice but not overwhelming turnout for. That was going on outside, while inside in the library, we're having a very successful book sale. The Friends of the Library this is only their 2nd book sale, so they're kind of learning how to do it, and they did a great job. Second thing I wanted to point out is on page 3 of my report is Commissioner Uderman with us today?
He was earlier.
Okay.
He had to step off. He had a hard stop at 5 p.m. I didn't check his the comment that he made, but I'll just let you know he had a hard stop at 5 p.m. He dropped off.
Okay, there's just a picture of that STEM window that we talked about before with members of the city council person from Chanhassen. And I just wanted to report that every single day this window gets used multiple times. As it's the summer, we have tons of kids coming in, returning books, and they're just fascinated by watching the automated materials handler or the book roller coaster work. Then on the next page is our Grower Garden story time. This, along with our help desk, is a nice partnership we set up with the Master Gardeners. So I just wanted you to see that. And then the last thing is I always put up pictures of displays. And I just wanted to call your attention to this one. It's similar. That the staff at Chanhassen, I think, does an excellent job of recognizing when we have months dedicated to a celebration. So for example, for May was Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. So in our children's room, which I did not get a picture of, our adult collection and our teen collection, we did nice displays of. So programming, collection, and good work being done with partnership and good work with the Friends are kind of the highlights of my report. Thanks.
Thanks, Patrick. So next on is I think Jody.
Thank you. All right. So we too at Chaska have the Master Gardener Partnership Grow a Garden Story Time. And That was a great morning, wonderful, nice turnout. And then we were able to use the outdoor plaza space outside of the library where they could go and plant their seeds. So kind of a nice indoor-outdoor experience for families. And certainly right now, because of the seed library project at Chaska, where there's a really big focus on gardening. So it was just perfect timing to tie that in. I did note in my bullet points in my report that as of June 3rd, we had 58 participants signed up for the seed library project, and we've circulated 263 packets of Seed Saver heirloom seeds. So, and certainly even since, where we're at today on June 14th, we've circulated more than that and signed up more folks. So really great to see the excitement and engagement over that program. A couple other things to note, it's great to see outreach resuming, or outreach opportunities for our librarians. A great event that happened up at City of Carver's fire department was a bike safety and rodeo event. And our adult services librarian took that outreach event, and he actually rode his bike up there with his outreach materials. So, but really nice opportunity to help promote the summer reading program. So I've got pictures as well that I included of the Grow a Garden story time, and then just a couple notes about our space at Chaska. Certainly since we have that new entrance, we're still kind of watching the flow of traffic and watching how people have adapted to that new entrance. So with that, we've done some new lettering for our service desk and our teen area with some vinyl lettering on the columns. So we're updating some of that to try to help patrons kind of find their way, and changing up where some of our displays are. We also shifted a little bit in our teen area just to kind of cozy up that space for our teen patrons and encourage them to come in and have that safe space. So it's been really actually a lot of fun and really exciting, and great to hear feedback as people come into the library about those changes. And this is, we're into June now, and it's been so exciting to see the traffic coming through the door with summer reading program and seeing that foot traffic pick up. So it's been great.
Thanks, Jody. So
Thank
we're going to go.
Can you tell us a little about the Oceans of Possibilities? Your theme, Oceans of Possibilities.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear that. That is, and with Paul's role with youth services, he may want to speak to that as well. But Oceans of Possibilities is a theme that we tie into, which is a national theme through an organization that I know the acronym CSLP. But then it gives us an opportunity to tie our program themes and some of our graphics and promotional pieces, and you'll see some of the staff wearing shirts and buttons and things, and just ties in all of that together in a fun way to help bring those kiddos in the summer and families.
Oh, sounds nice. Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks, Jody. I'm going to go next to Norwood Young America, Waconia, and Watertown. Paul?
Thank you. I'll pick up on that question that Jody had answered, and really would say you really covered the bases. It is the CSLP, I think, stands for Consortium Summer Library Programs. They actually do support more programming beyond summer programming, but that's the big one. Interestingly enough, I believe this had initially begun as a collaborative effort by some Minnesota libraries quite a few years ago, and it had, through its success, had grown to a national scope. There are a couple other parallel organizations like this one. We pay a very modest, very small membership fee each year for access and the ability to download and use artwork and all the other things that go along with the theme. And then there are many program vendors that that also tie into this. So it really just opens up opportunities for us to not have to recreate a wheel. In the western branches, we continue to be challenged in each of our buildings with some kind of building related issue. Up at Watertown, we're very thankful, and I want to highlight this, very thankful that the city of Watertown had taken this past month as a time to do some repairs to foundation and the outside, the grading and runoff for water and everything like that around the perimeter of the building that was in disrepair and needed work. And time will tell as to whether that will finally be the corrective action that was needed to address the water problems that we had been plagued with. But we're very grateful for the work they did. We were fortunate that throughout almost the entire time that they had to take offline the air conditioning unit and move that aside in order to do that work, it actually was those cool days that we had this past month. And so the air conditioning came back online on Thursday at the Watertown branch. And right now they're just doing some fine tuning because it actually got too cool in the library yesterday. And so they're working on that, but we're very grateful for that work that they've done. Here at the Waconia building with a project that the CDA started to repair the drain pipes that are in the ceiling above us that come off of the garage above us. That work is still continuing, and so we have a lot of disrepair around the library. We're told that this week it's going to be wrapped up. You'll have to excuse my cynicism, but we've heard that one before. And so we're hopeful that this work will be inspected and they'll be given the seal of approval and that the walls can be closed up and painted and sheetrocked and all that other work. And then out at the Norwood Young America branch, we had another leak from the ceiling above. It's my understanding, I wasn't there firsthand, this was on Saturday. And kudos to the staff, our person in charge who had to handle all this, and to the city of Norwood staff who came out, were very responsive to phone calls and were out almost immediately to pull down the ceiling tiles that were drenched and were about ready to collapse. And that certainly could have been a very serious safety issue. They were very responsive. It's my understanding that it was a leaky toilet, an overflowed toilet up above us from an apartment. And so there's still additional cleanup work. I think that the CDA ought to be taken care of, and I need to work with them on that. Fortunately, it just missed the computer that was right below where the water came down and didn't hit any books. So it was, at this point, what we have left for cleanup is the carpet that ought to be shampooed, ought to be cleaned. So some frustrations there for sure, but we just work our way through them. Otherwise, on the positive note, I'd echo what Jody and Patrick said. Summer reading program, we've had great attendance. At the early event so far, we had a music in the park last week that was a beautiful day. And we had upwards of 300 people attending. And we are, many of our branches, and we're working through because we haven't done a lot of outdoor programming, not at this level. And so we're working through some process about what to do with if there's inclement weather and addressing those kinds of things. But otherwise, looks like summer reading program is off to a very good start this year. And then finally, as reported in the written report, is another of our new substitutes that we've, Patrick, Jody, and I have interviewed and hired. And so Beth has had her second day here today. And right before the meeting, she was getting ready to leave at the end of her shift at 4 o'clock. And I asked her, I said, "You going to come back on Thursday?" And she said, "Oh yeah, oh yeah." So, so we haven't scared her away. It's a long learning curve for new subs to really get everything under. But we're very happy with these 2 new subs that have come on board with us, and hope that they will help round out some of our schedules when we have staff that are out. That's my report. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Matt's not here, so I'm going to go straight to Alan Kruger on the Library Foundation.
Yes, that's Krieger, Alan
Great,
Krieger.
sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I want to tell everybody that I missed the Friends of the Library meeting last time, and also the Artisan Fair. The reason being, this is for Paul's information mostly. I was going for a bike ride, slipped off my bike, hit the ground, and had a major, what they call a hematoma on my behind, and took a couple weeks to repair. I was actually bedridden, and I'm very displeased with myself, although it was an accident, about missing that. And I also missed the Memorial Day program here at the school, and I was instrumental in helping with the program. Anyway, this library board and myself have been interested in somehow bringing in a veterans program. And in August, the Carver County Library Council is promoting it's actually the second annual, it's called a resiliency program. And what resiliency means is, I don't know, veterans somehow get better for being veterans. Last year, there was an amputee, a double amputee, and he spoke on it. And his message was, don't look back, just move forward. This year, we've found a retired chaplain colonel who has spent a lot of his career teaching things about suicide. And he's going to be presenting what we've titled Suicide Awareness to the community of Carver County. It's going to be held at the American Legion in Chanhassen on August 17th, which is a Wednesday, starting at 5:30. It's for veterans and families. And I was the one who recommended the speaker. I've known him for several years, and actually took one of his courses when I was in the Army Reserve. It was a 2-week class on suicide prevention. So he's a wonderful speaker, and he is going to, I've found a person who has experienced suicide in his family and is willing to have his brain picked by Glenn Blum. His name is Glenn. His last name is Bloomstrom. No, it's Bloomberg. Anyway, how the library, we want to, what this library board has wanted was somehow to incorporate veterans into the library program. And so Jody has volunteered to come up with a book display on that particular day, and also to Skype the actual program on August 17th. So I'm in charge of the signage, and I'm going to send out as many people as I can come up with what's going on that day. And we're hoping for about 100 to 125 people to attend. So this will be the first veterans program associated with Carver County Library. Any questions on that?
No, I think good. Any questions? We will go to the next item. I don't, were there any correspondence or additional updates and information though, Heidi? I looked at my package. I realized I didn't get. There were no media packages enclosed, so I'm not sure if there was one supposed to be.
I don't
And
know.
that might have been, yeah, that might have been our fault. We did not have Susan, our admin assistant, in the office. And so we probably did not tell the person who is her replacement for that time in getting the board packets out that those needed to be there. So my apologies.
I did see Jody's article on the Chaska Herald. So that's one thing I saw. I only get Chaska Herald, so I always look out for library articles by one of our people. So I think Jody always writes something in the Chaska Herald, so I did read that. But yeah. So that's anything else? Any other questions or anything you want to add to the meeting? Anybody else? If not, can I have, so I just want to say, I really appreciate the update you gave us about the pandemic and how we reacted to it. And I think it, it's, it just shows how flexible everyone was willing to be to make it work. The fact that it was seamless to many people just speaks volume rather than, the fact that it's quiet, it speaks volume. Sometimes silence is volume. So I thought that was a good update. I've not heard anybody complain or say anything about how the library was, which for me speaks volume rather than anything else. So I just want to say thank you very much for all the work you all put in handling the transition.
And it shows how much they care for their patrons.
Right. Exactly. If there are no other comments, I will ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I will second.
And everyone who agrees, say aye.
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 And motion carried. So I just one other item I want to motion carried. To say one other item is in regards to next meeting. We'll still play it by ear, and I will liaise with Heidi and we'll come up with something hopefully a couple of weeks before the meeting itself. Are you okay with that, Heidi?
Oops. Yes.
Okay. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Charles.